Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, since 1968, more Americans have been killed by gun violence in the United States than have died in all of our wars in American history combined, from the Revolution to the last casualty in Afghanistan. That is a heavy toll on public safety and public health, and as a body, this Senate can do more and should do more to make our communities safer. It has been too many years with too little action, too much tragedy and heartbreak since the last debate on guns. I know all of my colleagues share my utter horror at the mass shooting at the Sandy Hook Elementary School last December. And yet our responses to this and other tragedies, in some cases, are vastly different. I am motivated by them to demand passage of serious, concrete, and comprehensive measures to try to safeguard innocent and precious lives, to prevent the next Newtown, the next Aurora, the next Tucson, and countless other devastating examples of senseless gun violence. Unfortunately, it seems that we are on the verge of throwing up our hands and saying, there is nothing we can do. There is something we can do. We will take a series of votes this afternoon to reinstate the assault weapons ban and prohibit high-capacity magazines, amendments I am co-sponsoring, and a compromise effort to close the gun show loophole and require better background checks. These measures balance protection for responsible gun ownership with protection for public safety. As someone who has served in the United States military, I believe that carrying a gun is a serious responsibility. However, today it is far too easy for criminals, domestic abusers, gang members, and terrorists to buy weapons. Today's New York Times described just how easy it is. One South Carolinian man is noted as, quote, a fugitive from Rhode Island police who has 2 outstanding felony warrants as well as a misdemeanor warrant. His legal status bars him from owning guns, but he was recently seeking to buy an AK-47 assault rifle on the website Arms List and was also trying to trade a Marlin rifle. He posted photos to his Facebook account of an AK-47 he had already purchased, along with a variety of other guns. Clearly, the system is broken, and there is room for common sense reform. Indeed, we need to close this gaping loophole in current law that allows the sale of firearms at gun shows or online without accountability or background checks. And these checks would determine whether the buyer has a criminal record or is otherwise prohibited from acquiring the weapon. The Manchin-Toomey compromise, while not perfect and not my ideal solution, would go a long way towards closing these loopholes. I want to personally commend both Senator Manchin and Senator Toomey for their thoughtful, comprehensive, bipartisan, and indeed, in many respects, courageous steps to try to make this legislation possible for all of us. In March of 2004, during the 108th Congress, when Democrats were in the minority, Senator McCain and I worked together on bipartisan legislation to close the gun show loophole. With his great leadership, we passed an amendment, 53-46, that was one of several successful gun safety amendments. Ultimately, the gun lobby defeated the underlying bill, a bill it had originally sponsored, supported, and had identified as its top priority, because we had managed to pass sensible firearms controls, at least in the amendments to that legislation. But this is proof that passing sensible legislation to keep guns out of the hands of dangerous individuals is possible with bipartisan cooperation. We've done it. Gun ownership is a fundamental right in this country, but reasonable limitations on military-style assault weapons and high-capacity ammunition clips are fully consistent with the Second Amendment. Indeed, in the 2008 majority opinion in the Heller decision, Justice Scalia made clear that the Second Amendment is, quote, not unlimited, unquote, and is not, quote, a right to keep and carry any weapon whatsoever in any manner whatsoever and for whatever purpose, end quote. Limiting access to military-style weapons and strengthening background checks would help save lives and make our communities safer. We also need to improve access to mental and behavioral health care. One of the ironies is that often many times the victim of gun violence or other types of violence is suffering from mental disability. It's not the stereotype that these individuals are the perpetrators of all of this violence. But it's important to incorporate within this legislation measures that will help strengthen our mental health system. And that's why I support the Harkin-Alexander Amendment, which among many provisions would include my bipartisan reauthorization of the Garrett Lee Smith Memorial Act, legislation that was led very courageously and successfully by our former colleague, Senator Gordon Smith. I urge my colleagues to support these amendments, to muster the same kind of bipartisan cooperation that Senator McCain and I and several others years ago led to the successful passage of the gun show background check. I hope we can reach a sensible consensus. Indeed, an overwhelming majority of Americans are demanding this. There is no question what the American people want. The question we will settle today, are we responding to the American people, or are we responding to a very narrow self-interest? I hope we respond to the American people. And with that, Mr. President, I would yield the floor.